episode 18 now, so this is where we're fully rolling into the end of this season, which is fantastic. So thank you, Debs, for coming on, and I think you should give a little explanation as why me and Bill have been desperate to get you on for most of this series, but a few pandemics have slowed the whole process down.
Yeah. Those big diseases nearly stopped me coming on. Well, I don't really know why you want me on so badly, but I guess it's because we're going to talk about personality types, and I think everybody is fascinated to understand more about themselves. And my expertise is in behaviour. That's what I do. I'm a trainer, facilitator, run my own business. Well, I did until this virus hit, and I lost every single date out of my diary. But so we focus on soft skills and behaviour, and this Myers-Briggs stuff that we're going to look at this evening is so amazing and interesting. And it's funny because it's particularly interesting right now because we're all so separated from each other, yet we're really, like you said, really close together, our family, so we can really see all the different behaviours coming in. So
that's why. So I should frame this well, that you and I worked together 6 or 7 years ago, maybe,
yes. Yeah.
And then maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
It was just before Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah, God, that seems decades ago. Yeah. So and it was fascinating to me, and you're right, because of this kind of distance between everyone working, I'm using a lot of the things that we kind of talked through about how my brain, and we'll go through this, I imagine Bill's is the same, how our brains work, all scatty, compared to more detail-orientated people.
Don't drag me down with you. I mean, I think this thing, so for those that are new to the idea of a Myers-Briggs, there are a few different type of personality and behavioural kind of systems out there, but Myers-Briggs is a way of identifying what type of personality you are. Is that right, Deb? So trying to understand how you might react in certain situations and how people might react to your style of doing things, and to offer insights into that, and ultimately how you might evolve to communicate your messages better to people that aren't like you. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of summing it up. It's about preferences. It's about our preferences in certain things. It's not everything, because it doesn't measure your attitude or your intelligence or your aptitude or your values, but it does look at certain preferences, particularly in the way we like to interact with each other, talk to each other, communicate with each other. And it can shine a light a lot on why some relationships are really, really easy and just happen and just so organic and comfortable, and some feel really sticky and difficult and hard work and tiring, even if they happen to be a partner.
I see. Yeah. Do you know what? I saw it as a translation tool. It's what comes out of my mouth is not what another person is hearing, because of all my unknown ways that I operate. And I've told my wife about it loads, and she just laughs, and she's like, yes, that is exactly how your brain works. It's been a great communication tool.
But these things that you do ostensibly for work and for commercial benefit it's a toolkit that makes your personal relationships better. I mean, I'm certainly finding out with the MBA stuff that negotiation, we're doing an elective in negotiation. It's been incredibly useful at helping to manage my personal life. There's a huge crossover here, and there's a really funny, slight side, there's a very funny book called Never Split the Difference, The Art of Negotiation. And it's about this, it's written by this FBI negotiator who, anyway, I brought it home, left it on the coffee table. Now it's by Lucy's bed. She's halfway through it. And every night she's plowing through it. And I look nervously over at this budding negotiator who's going to do that. But,
we should also...
Don't let it get into kids' hands. That's when it's dangerous.
We should outline for those listening, Bill and I have taken the test that you do before, because normally this would be a day-long workshop that you would do with us, and the workshop will be done with your team, and the bigger the team, I feel the more helpful this is. But it can apply to anyone, even if you're just two people and you're having any friction, couples relations, for example. But it's been really good. So at the end of the episode, we're going to go through mine and Bill's results for this test and see if mine and Bill, are we personality perfect together?
Be honest, Ben. Did you answer it truthfully, or did you answer it wanting to look good?
No, we had this discussion actually earlier, Debs. We both agreed that if you'd have asked us to do this a year ago, we would have, I think, been faster through the answers. But now I was a little bit more, there was no middle ground. They were all 50-50 questions. It was you either this or you that. So we felt like our personalities through work had maybe, I'm not going to say matured, but maybe we would answer them differently.
Well, the thing is, the theory is based on Carl Gustav Jung, and his thoughts were that it's a bit like, if you think about the fact that you're born either right-handed or left-handed, very few people are born ambidextrous. We're born one or the other. So if I said to you, sign your name with your normal hand, you would sign it and it'd be really easy and really fluid. But if I got you to put it in the other hand, you would find you might have to change position, you might have to take longer, you wouldn't be so satisfied, you'd have to really be conscious of it. And that's sort of the difference really between these preferences. Having said that, of course, we learn how to sign our name, but we don't learn to be left-handed or right-handed. So Carl Gustav Jung's thought was, we're born using one or the other hand or one of the other preferences, but we can learn another one so it becomes equally as comfortable. So when you're sort of answering the questionnaire and it pushes you towards one way or another, that's where the conflict might kick in on something you've learned, where you think, oh, actually I do both. And of course you do. But what we're sort of looking at with Myers-Briggs is to find your shoes off self, that comfortable place where actually this is, if I could really choose the way I want to behave, it would be this way. But, when we're at work, we might be someone different. When we're with other people or, in a certain situation, it's very environmental. We have situational preferences as well.
That's so interesting, because I was going to say that. Should we be looking for roles that allow us to be who we naturally tend towards, or should we be looking for sort of self-improvement or stretch theory, and some of these?
I think that it's funny. We might think we're stretching and going to something more challenging. It feels more outside our comfort zone. The chances are, though, it's still appealing to our preferences. There's lots and lots of research being done on this, that people end up in the jobs that would possibly been recommended for their preference. There's loads of stuff on this. Having said that, that doesn't mean you don't want to work those muscles, but it's a bit like, if you imagine going to the gym. So it's a bit like this. You go to the gym and, well, not that we're going to the gym now, but you know what I mean. We're working out. We might be particularly strong in our upper body. So what we want to do is what we think we want to do is work our lower body to strengthen that up. What we'd end up doing, and we don't even do it consciously, is we end up still working our upper body because it's easier. Our body defaults to something easier. And so what happens, of course, is we grow those muscles, they get stronger, and the ones that we should be building get weaker. So if we're not careful, we can end up slightly imbalanced in the body, and the same in these preferences.
And it's interesting, actually, and we're doing a lot of like managing through crisis stuff at the moment.
Yes.
And one of the ways we're reinforcing teams and community is to actually give people tasks that they're very comfortable performing, to reinforce that sense of, I'm contributing, I'm part of this team, my life might be upset at the moment, but I was able to complete that task really successfully, and you feel more kind of confident. So I guess there are times to move in between your chest day and your leg day, aren't there?
Yeah, exactly, because there's so much stress. People are so outside their comfort zone already, they perhaps don't need an extra bit. But yeah, you're right that it's good to challenge the other preference, to learn it and develop it, but not to the point where it's so uncomfortable you're miserable.
Do you know what I found?
Oh, sorry, go on, Ben.
I found one of the interesting things when we did this course together, we were on a very large team. One of the things I enjoyed was there's the personality that I think I have, and there's the response that the rest of my team had to me. And I felt, just where you were there, I felt like I had the most extreme of what, like, everyone was like, oh, classic Ben. And I was like, I wasn't aware that my personality traits were that strong in one direction. So I found it quite revealing in that way. So it's unnerving to me that maybe what I do, and I think I do, and what I actually do, maybe is slightly disconnected.
Yeah, there's something there about like I did something similar to this as sort of 360 for this course that I'm doing, and
The MBA.
you've got to try and not be. I always bang on it, but you've got to try and not be defensive about it actually, and I just accept that we are different, and you have strengths and you have weaknesses, and the less sort of that sort of threat rigidity response, the more fluid you are to hit, the more receptive you are, I guess, the better. Oh, I have certainly found that.
Well, here's the thing. That's a really important point, because what this is about is actually about appreciating your preferences and your type and others, rather than seeing it. Yeah, if you overplay a strength, obviously it can be a weakness. But Myers-Briggs is very positive. It's about a very positive slant. And actually, it's really about appreciation. It's about appreciating yourself and appreciating others. Yes, there's differences. But actually, rather than seeing that as alien or difficult or not correct, actually to see it and to appreciate it as different.
Have you ever had to play back a Myers-Briggs score to a sociopath and try to bring out any positive elements?
Well, it's not, I don't know about a sociopath, but definitely someone who was several people actually, they've been extremely cynical, to the point where they're almost, aggressively defending themselves and almost going anti everything. So every single thing, they were being anti it, to the point where the whole thing, I mean, I had one day in particular where we had this group of people that were just, funnily enough, they were all one type. There's a particular type that can be like this.
You see?
Funny enough, one of you are that type, but I won't say which one. That doesn't mean it's bad, but these particular people were in a funny place, and they were just arguing against everything, which is really interesting, but and not particularly positive for everybody else on the course. But
I do find, I see what's interesting is we've done this twice, and my role and my level in the team had changed dramatically from one to the other. And I found that the first time I did this, I had similar results. But actually, the first time I did it, I can't remember if you remember, we had quite a similar team, and you did the results and you said everyone who has this result go left and everyone has this result go right. And my entire team went right, and it was just me on the left.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, and one of them was like, you're detailed, you're forward thinking, you're very kind of, I can't remember all the things. And it was like, and at the other end, you're creative, you're impulsive. And it was like all things that didn't really sound very useful on construction sites.
Yeah, but of course, that's the thing. It's a perception, isn't it? Of course, there are things like creativity and spontaneity and all that are very useful, but for something different. So that's why you need all the different preferences in a team to balance it all out, so that you actually appreciate each other's strengths.
Deb, do you think the process of taking teams through the tests is part of the healing and success of the process, rather than here's a report to make you more aware of where your shortcomings are or what your strengths are? Do you think that sort of making people quite vulnerable in front of each other, and the process is the message, really?
Absolutely. The report is really not anything at all. I mean, anybody can go online and do the report and do the questionnaire, get a report back, and it's quite meaningless. It could almost be a horoscope then. The real beauty of it, the real strength of it, is, like you say, taking the team through all the exercises and getting them to be open and vulnerable and appreciating each other and seeing each other in a different light, opening it all up, talking about it, which is what it was like when we did it with your team recently, because they were quite cynical to start with, but by the end of it, weren't they? They were like, right, wow, this is pretty amazing.
The great thing was on our course specifically is that what you were saying, the actual process of the course is the good part. The actual results are they're just an interesting side note essentially, but it puts your part ones and your directors in teams together, and it gives everyone a shared platform. Everyone's of the same height, everyone gets the same amount of airtime, and actually it allows everyone to listen in an environment that would never normally happen. It is a great process. It's the bigger the team, I think.
It's great if you're a couple of extroverts and you think this is great. I mean, Deborah, I don't expect you to remember the one that we did together, but an unnamed individual on ours was asked to present her theories and burst into tears and left the room.
I know.
And there was I just thinking, this is great. We don't have to do any work. It's just talking about ourselves. This is. I've got all day, and there's a lunch. Fantastic. You know, and for some people, it's a rather, you know, it's in the diary and it's full of dread and apprehension.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, the introverts always come off the worst in any of those sorts of things. However, for once, they do get a chance to be heard. So it depends how it's all managed as well. But and also, you know, extroverts can burst into tears as well, to be fair, because they have a moment of realization and don't quite know what to do with it. So that's why you have to be quite careful. And I have to be a practitioner to do it. It's not just anyone can just do it, because you have to be able to manage all of that stuff. But you're absolutely right. Extroverts love it. Introverts take a bit more time to come to.
So how bad is Ben? That's what we're really
how
here
bad
to.
is Ben?
Yeah, out of 10, what's his personality going out as?
Well, I can't say anything bad about Ben because Ben's got the same personality type as me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I knew I was in a safe zone.
So, Deb, can you talk us through how many personality types are there in this particular framework?
All right, so let's talk about the preferences first, and then we can open it up to that. So the first preference is the introvert-extrovert, which we've just been talking about. So this is the one that most people know most about because it's talked about. It's sort of their street words. We use them all the time. But there's a total misconception about them. So introverts are often described as shy and quiet and probably quite cool and maybe a bit, antisocial, that sort of thing. And extroverts are often described as being confident and outgoing and sociable, loud, bit sort of center of attention, maybe arrogant. But actually, some of those things are true. But on the whole, introverts are more internally focused in terms of their energy. So their energy is contained and they recharge themselves. They don't need anything else around them. And extroverts are much more out there and much more outward. So they recharge, get their energy from things external. So if you don't know what an introvert is thinking, you haven't asked. If you don't know what an extrovert is thinking, you haven't listened. So extroverts will talk their thoughts, introverts will want to think first. So that's the sort of first preference. Most people get a bit confused by it as well because, unfortunately, there's this social stigma that it's better to be an extrovert. It is disappearing, but it's still there. You know, our teachers always said to us, didn't they, speak up, get out there, you know, and you get pushed. So introverts often get pushed into being more extrovert. So what happens is you end up with confused introverts. A lot of introverts think they're extrovert when they're not. In my experience, it's much easier for an introvert to develop extroversion than it is for extroverts to be introvert.
There it is, the blow that we were waiting for.
And I think also...
Actually, Deb, what we're saying, we have lots of students that listen to this podcast. And I remember the first time I heard this, we had half the room nodding or shaking, and then you'd say extrovert, and everyone would be like, classic extrovert. One of the fun things is listening to this as someone else and hearing them going, yeah, maybe, no. And they're like, no, you're not an extrovert, you're an introvert. It's fascinating watching people process that the first time.
Yeah, and don't forget there is something where you've developed one of them so much that you might actually not know which one you are anymore. And it doesn't matter, providing that you can identify it with someone else where it's not quite working. Because the classic mistakes that introverts and extroverts make is that introverts don't give enough feedback to extroverts. So they immediately think, oh, why are they not talking to me? What are they thinking? Do they not like me? And then the other way around, of course, the extroverts are constantly cutting across the introverts all the time. So you can tell we're quite happy interrupting each other, even in this medium, chatting, interrupting, we're quite happy with that. But if we had an introvert on, I'm giving some clues away now about your personality types, but if we had an introvert on, they probably wouldn't say anything until we all shut up. They'd just be quiet the whole time unless we went, right, John, what do you think? You know?
That to me was the biggest thing that I took away from the second one was allowing time for the other person to answer, because that essentially was the thing that I wasn't doing properly with a few of our team who were introverted. I just assumed they weren't they weren't involved or whatever, and I just stopped. Gave them that extra 2 seconds that me and Bill are incapable of doing, and then allowing that person to speak, and it really did help. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they don't speak because there's nothing for them to say, but we need to give them that space and allow them that, and not to cut them off. It's very important. But I was thinking, in terms of this isolation we're having now, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Who is coping with it better, extroverts or introverts?
Deb, this is such a pertinent point, and it's what's so great about you coming on now, even though the sound might not be as good as people are normally listening to. It's a very it's this sort of existential crisis, and if you're an extrovert, you're kind of like all the places you find your energies, your groups of friends, your families, your parties are stripped of you, and you really lean into things like Zoom. I'm back on the telephone like I haven't been since the 90s. I'm clapping for the NHS, but I'm really just trying to see how many people there are in each of the houses, and I think it's a great time to think about this. Has this been a close friend of mine? This has been one of the best times of his life. It's like the opportunity cost. There's nothing happening. I'm at home. I'm just cooking. I'm chilling with my family. There's nothing going on. He's could not be happier.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but there are obviously still challenges for introverts. So introverts, if they're in a house full of their family that are quite extroverted, and it's quite a small place, they're going to be desperately searching for somewhere to go for eye time. So a garden shed, or the bedroom, or they might be desperately trying to find their quiet time, whereas us extroverts are desperately trying to find people to interact with. And this sort of medium as well, so having to communicate on something like Zoom is an introvert's nightmare, whereas we don't mind it. We're all right with it. We prefer face-to-face, but we can deal with it.
Why is that? Because you have to be assertive to interrupt.
Yeah, it's so hard for them. They really struggle. And we're, as a training company, that's one of the areas that we're doing some work now virtually, is helping introverts actually deal with this. So although they might be stronger in some ways dealing with this isolation, they're also struggling too.
Could you give for someone listening now who's an introvert using Zoom and feeling that they're not being very assertive at work, is there just without meaning to give your whole game away, is there something you could say to help them?
Well, to be honest, the key thing is the more they do it, the more confident they're going to get with it. So it is a lot of it. It's to overcome the barrier in the first place of actually getting on and doing it. Because I bet a lot of them sit there thinking, I don't want to do this, don't want to do this. Or the classic thing is they pretend that the video's not working. If you notice some of your team that you're talking to are not coming on video, and they're saying, oh no, my video's not working, it's because they just don't want to be seen. And it's almost an introvert's way of dealing with it. So the more they push past that and do it, the better it will get. But also it's, if they plan, that introverts like to plan. So this is where we can help them if we're a team leader or a manager, is actually give them space, tell them what the meeting's about, give them time to think. The more they have time to think and prepare, the better they are, the more likely they are to speak, the more confident they are. And I think the person that chairs any sort of meeting with introverts on it needs to be really conscious of that.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And, before we move on from the introvert-extrovert thing, one of the things I remember us all talking about, I think even I may have said this, was that sometimes I don't want to be around lots of people, even though I consider an extrovert. And I think you explained, extroverts need to recharge. They need to be on their own. They I guess you explain it. But.
Yeah, well, basically, we all need a bit of time to recharge. I mean, most times we are happy as extroverts to recharge with things around us, but that doesn't always mean people. We get just as exhausted from because we get quite competitive about who's heard and who gets to speak up, and that can be hard work. So we might want to walk our dogs on our own, but it's funny how much different we are when we do it. So, for instance, an introvert will do it very quietly, not interact. And I've noticed, if I've been walking my dog, and this social distancing, this is how introverts will socially distance by not saying anything. They just don't say anything, just move away. And it's almost like, oh, good, I've got permission not to actually interact. Whereas an extrovert walking their dog on their own, enjoying the eye time, they feel obliged to actually explain why they're not able to contact, even though everybody knows. It's like, I'm sorry. Oh, they make a little joke of it. You know, they can't help themselves. They have to connect with that person. And
Oh,
it's
that's so on
hilarious.
point.
Yeah, so hilarious to see.
I've spoken to more neighbours over fences and had more random conversations with people.
And the jokey thing is a classic thing, especially for an extroverted feeler. They'll want to have a little joke, make a joke, lighten it up, because they feel worried that they haven't been able to connect in the normal way.
So, Deb, when you talk about this, it's quite a binary thing, the sort of introverts and the extroverts. What's the spectrum on the Myers-Briggs? Does it give you a number of... Well, should we hear the result? Ben, are you ready to hear how bad
Debs, is it best if you explain quickly the other ones and then at the end we'll do them?
The other ones, and then we'll get the question. We can have a look at yours. So the other one, so that's to be honest, the introvert extrovert one is a huge one because it interacts with everything else. But the other one is, are you a more detailed person or are you more big picture? So that's the S and the N, and this is about how we take in information, how we give information. So, for instance, if you're more an S in the situation we're in right now, you will be so fascinated by the numbers. How many people have contracted the disease? What is the death toll right now? You know, the numbers are so crucial to that S. Got to be in the now, the practical, the reality. Whereas the N's are more in that place of, it'll never be the same again. Life has changed forever. Maybe the world will be a better place. You know, that's sort of where the N's are going. Whereas the S are going, yeah, but 700 people died today, and we got this, and that's where there can be that sort of misunderstanding in terms of communication. So that's quite interesting.
Did you say N was the feeling one? Did you say N?
No. So S is more detailed, concrete, real.
Yeah.
And N's are more big picture, concepts, possibilities, the future. So the thinker and feeler I'm going to come on to in a minute. But those two are about information and how we take it in and how we want it.
I'm just writing them down. I'm writing them down what I think I am. So when they come up, because I think me and Bill I can see Bill's camera. He keeps chuckling away because you're basically describing how we've interacted for the last 2 weeks.
But it's just, I hear myself doing it. Oh, they've taken all the homeless off the street. That means there won't be any more homeless people again. Whereas the S's are going, nah, actually, I've looked at the statistics and only 350 people were taken off the streets in London.
Yeah. They've taken them off because they're dead.
That's the difference. And then you've got the T and the F. So the T and the F preference is about, first of all, this is not about, if you're a T, it doesn't mean you're a psychopathic, cold-hearted bastard. And if you're an F, it doesn't mean that, yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean you're fluffy bunny ears crying at everything, a complete mess. However, thinkers make decisions from outside. They step back and they take the objective view. They think about the evidence, the criteria. So, and then you've got the Fs who step into it. How's this going to affect me? And again, if you want to take this crisis as an example, you've got the Fs that will be going, oh my God, the humanity, you know, all these people dying. The nurse that sat, you know, told me about the fact that she's doing this, and the pictures of them, you know, the people with their red mask faces, and that's what they're focusing on. Where the T's are just going, well, you know what, it's fine. Most people that are affected by this are, you know, they have underlying health conditions and they're older, so it's probably going to be fine for me. That's sort of the difference between the T's and the F's. Honestly, the conversations I've been having, I just immediately know now, you're an F, you're a T. Just straight away, you know.
Bill, why are you chuckling? Are you chuckling because you identified instantly with one of those ones? They've just...
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, go on.
No, it's just funny. I'll come on to it later. I have changed in the last year, I think, a little bit on some of this, but I'm wondering how much I've really changed. That's what I'm laughing at. I feel secondly, how much have I really changed, or how much do I know I need to change? And I'm forcing my behaviour to a certain way. But I'm actually really interested to hear where I lie on this, because
we're nearly there with it, because the final preference is another big one, which is how we like to live our lives. So it's about, are we more the spontaneous, adapting type that goes with things as they arrive and just deals with it bit by bit, like things are emerging and changing? and there's not too much structure. Deadlines are quite fluid. Sort of these are the P's. It's called the perceiving function, but it's more around adapting and spontaneity. Whereas the J, which is the judging function, is much more around planning and knowing where things are, having control, step by step by step. So again, in terms of this crisis we're in right now, the J's probably the moment they went into lockdown and had to work from home or were at home, they probably drew out a list of all the things they wanted to achieve during this time. They probably wrote all the list and they started to do them bit by bit, cleaning out the cupboards, sorting out their laptops and things that they hadn't been had time to do, doing their gardening. Homeschooling would be rigid as this time, and then it's playtime and then it's iPad time. All of this being done. And they've got to the point now where they're like, there's nothing, I don't know what else to do. I've actually completed it. It's almost like they're in that place of everything's done. So now what do I do? Whereas the P spent 2 weeks going, this is interesting. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with my time, how it's going to work. I'll just go with it. I'll do a bit of this, do a bit of that. And now I'm a bit worried about, okay, well, what's my purpose? Because actually there's no deadlines. Nothing is forcing me to do any of this. And they're probably just getting to that point now where they think, I think I might clean out a cupboard. Or I might, restructure my whole workload. And that's, again, the difference between the two types. Very, very interesting. But both probably coming to the same point, what do I do? How do I deal with this?
One of the things that fascinated me the most as well, and the things that really did stick in my head to this day is, and I can't remember which one this is, but you explained how someone's mind, you used a metaphor that, people it looks like they're not doing anything because they're internalizing it. They're thinking,
Yes.
and right at the last minute they suddenly go whoop, and do the work. Because they're thinking about it, whereas another person has a very kind of step-stare arrangement of how their brain works, little intermediate things. And those two people to work together tend to find challenges because that's not how their brains work. So you have to, anyway.
Exactly. Causes a lot of conflict. That's that J and P. So if you imagine a couple in a house working together because they're having to work at home, you've got, one of the partnership very planned, got everything set out, and the other one just going with the flow, just whatever happens. You can imagine what that looks like.
You're basically describing mine and my wife's relationship right now.
Yeah, you can see how the conflict comes from it. What are you doing? What are you doing with your time? Well, I'm doing a bit of thinking, and I'm just working things out. Yeah, but what are you actually doing? Well, nothing yet.
Bill, does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I saw a great tweet today that said, my wife and I played this great game in lockdown called "Why Are You Doing It That Way?" There are no winners. I can relate to it. I can relate to it. I think this is going to be quite helpful for relationships. It does help you be sympathetic to other alternative approaches.
Did you
exactly?
Did you see that quote? I can't remember whose wife it was. Suddenly, just went and poof. No one ever asked a stay-at-home mum what they do during the day ever again. There's my wife has suddenly realised. Oh, Ben does do quite a bit of work, but in return, I've also realised how incredibly hard she has to work looking after the kids. There's been this really nice kind of okay, we're both stressed. No one's got an easier ride. Although my wife.
Yeah, and that's again the really nice thing when you do that, when you take a step back and you look at someone else and go, okay, so what they do and how they do it is very alien. It's not me. However, I can really appreciate that actually it works for them, and it can help me, and to almost have a sort of respect for it as opposed to you should be doing it my way sort of thing. Actually they can all complement each other.
Bill was saying, is there a swing between one to the other? I would say that something I've realized is that if I'm not stressed and I have time, I can align myself to what I know should be the more organized, visually, outwardly monitoring me role should be. But you put me under stress and I instantly go back to that kind of, okay, I have to work the only way that I know how under pressure, which is that kind of slightly chaotic.
That's an interesting point. That's because when we're stressed, we're more of what we are. So when we have a bit of stress that's fairly healthy, we tend to default to our actual type. But what's interesting is if some people get really stressed out by this whole thing with the situation we're in for whatever reason, maybe, they've got other pressures, maybe the financial pressures or whatever it is, there is something called in the grip. And in the grip is where you flip personality types and you become almost the opposite. So, when you feel like you're a bit stressed and you get to that point where you only way you can work is the way you normally work. It's when you go further that and you flip. And what you find is that people suddenly become the opposite. So the spontaneous becomes the planned. The detailed person becomes the big picture. The introvert suddenly becomes extroverted. And that's when you start to notice people acting really strangely. And of course, that's because it's in the grip is not a healthy place. It's close to mental health issues if you get to that place. So that's quite interesting thing to sort of watch out for in people and be able to sort of know when to help them, if you like, if that's happening.
It's almost a sort of manic state, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's where you've lived. So for me, I've only ever been in the grip once in my life, and I became an introverted, detailed planner, which was absolutely my opposite. And it freaked everybody out. They were like, what the hell is going on? It didn't last long, but bizarre.
It's so interesting. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, like, people will have time to think about this kind of stuff while they're separated and you're isolated, and you have a bit more autonomy over your working patterns and your day and the immediate environment that you're working in. So it's not, the desks and the lighting and everything from the timing to the day to when you eat, to when you exercise. It might fall, certainly it's making me reflect on, how do I optimize my day? What are the bits, what do I eat a lot of chocolate at 3 PM when I don't do that in a work, what are my weekly? But equally, actually, from like 7 till 10 in the morning, I get loads more done. We might all come back from this with a slightly more refined understanding of what our what our behaviours are and what our drivers are.
Yeah, because we're sort of more in our. Some of us, we're finding it actually it's more comfortable. Actually, we've got more space to be who we want to be. So, and we can choose. Like you might choose to get up at 7 and work, whereas before you had to get to the office for a certain time or be in a meeting at a certain time. So maybe your rhythm is better at 7 AM. So absolutely, that could happen.
It's interesting as well because I've found that actually I'm so much more productive with no distractions. I mean, as long as I have all the information I need. And I've realized in my office, there's so many interesting things going on. I don't want to miss out. I want to hear what there's going on. So I'll hear the smallest sound and I'm like, and I'll run off. And it's like, without that, everything's so controlled. We'll talk for an hour and then it's off. It's actually a very kind of binary way of communicating. I don't get to hear anything like in the office anymore. It's just like on lockdown. For the short term, it's been all right.
Yeah, and as long as you've got an outlet for your extroversion, you'll be fine with that. That's it. They designed open plan offices because they thought it'd be a better way for people to work. And actually, extroverts find it really difficult to work in open plan offices.
I totally agree with that. And I, for me, the perfect day would be half a day, 3 or 4 hours at home, where you could just concentrate on a particular report. And then you could go in, and the afternoon is spent negotiating and talking and bouncing ideas and chatting. And, I mean, why not? I think, honestly, speaking as an N here, maybe, I don't know, but like,
absolutely.
Everything is on the table after this. There are going to be no crazy ideas for format of work. And if you come and say, I think this is going to work, and there's data to illustrate how that is better, I think bosses and businesses are going to be really open to alternative approaches. So
it's such a good point because we've pushed through that kind of technical or like that teething bit, well, maybe it would work, but it would require half the office to go home. We don't have the tech. We've got over that hump now. Like all of the latent requirements are all there now. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it saying necessity is the mother of all invention? Absolutely, it's what's happened, isn't it?
Well, before we go on to our results, I just wanted to ask a quick question about these actual results. I mean, the only times I've done these courses with you are almost reactive. They're kind of like, we should probably do this because we're a big team and things are starting to fray a little bit, and this would be a great time to do it. Do you ever get involved proactively? So before people have even created a team, do you assess personalities and decide roughly that I need to get one of each type and kind of put them together?
Well, I've certainly worked with senior directors that are looking at putting teams together and thinking about that. However, it should never be used as a recruitment tool.
Okay.
But it is a good idea to think about balance in a team. The reason it shouldn't be used for recruitment is it doesn't measure aptitude, intelligence, attitude, any of those things. But it isn't a good idea to have all the same type in a team, because it might feel nice, but there'll be big gaps in terms of skill sets if you do that. So I've worked at senior level to help with that. But also this is also used in one-to-one coaching. So people might do this to help them decide their career, for instance, where they might be best suited. So you might do it with young people to help them decide on where they might go in their career or where they might go, that sort of thing as well. Although it's not recruitment, it can help people decide their direction.
And Deb, on that, we've got loads of people who are like finishing their degrees. They're coming out now. It's a rather uncertain world. Architecture is quite a good base degree for going and doing lots of things. How would someone access the kind of thing that you do? You're a professional and you come into well kind of funded companies and incredibly expensive because you're so good. Are there tools or places that a student could go or someone with that much money could go and just to get an idea of this stuff?
Absolutely. So there's a really good website called 16 Personality Types. And if they go on and just put in 16 personality types, personality test, it comes up. There's an actual test they can do completely free of charge. It's not the sort of official Myers-Briggs one, but it's very good actually. And you might want to do it and use it to compare the sort of official reports that I sent you by email, because it's totally that one takes a different approach. It takes a more personal approach to what you are as a person. Myers-Briggs is more focused on work in a sense. So they can do that, and they can do that for free. And they get a really good comprehensive report from that. But what I would say is once you've done that, is then to be more open to feedback and asking other people what they think and how you're showing up. Because there's one thing to be something, it's also how are you showing up, how are you perceived? Because you can't really argue with that either if there's some trends.
I think I think if you're a bunch of students and you're kind of all together, do that test now and discuss it, because I guarantee you there'll be things that come out of it that you did not know about yourself. And
I'm going to send it to Lucy right now.
But it's a really fun one. So
maybe before Christmas, I'll send it to everybody, and we'll have the big reveal on Egg the Turkey.
Okay, is it time?
Yeah, you ready? What do you think you are? What do you think? So Ben, what do you think you are? What's your
Okay, so I've written down, I can't remember what they all are, so you'll have to remind me. I think I'm an ENFP.
Okay, ENFP. And Bill, what about you? What did you think?
I think I'm an ENTP.
Right, so you're both absolutely right. So yes, Ben, you are an ENFP, which is the same as me. And when you have a look at it on email, but I can just sort of show it up. You can see those. Can you see the bar charts? You can see all of yours are really strong, which means you are actually really clear about what you are. That's why you're very clear. You're very settled. You understand yourself. I think you're at a point in your life where you're actually accepting of that as well, which is that's not a bad thing. And then if we look at Bill's.
Here we go.
And
less settled.
No, they're very strong. So again, they're strong preferences. The only one that's not so strong is the J and the P, where it's moderate. But actually,
Bill, if you scored like the highest you can get on extroversion.
Yes, he has, more or less. It's a bit, that's mine. I'm like that. Mine's really out there. I've hardly got any introversion in me at all. So, yeah, yours is strong compared to, you look at the two. So, hang on. So actually, for Ben, they're always saying you this strong extrovert. You're not as strong. But this doesn't measure how much you are of something, more how clear you are.
Ah, interesting.
Basically,
That's so on
Bill
point.
is absolutely sure he's an extrovert, and so are you, but not as sure as Bill. So
what do you do with that kind of information?
Tone your extroversion down, Bill.
Yes. The ENFP, let me just, so the ENFP is my type. So we've got the same type, but that doesn't mean we're the same. It just means we've got certain preferences. But ENFPs tend to be the heart on their sleeve type people. And when you have a read of this report, things that are strengths for an ENFP, for instance, are energy, enthusiasm, thinking on your feet, good at really creating a fantastic network, lots of interests, and really good at having lots of opportunity to sort of share and inspire, and great communicators. And then if we compare that and if we compare that with Bill, so Bill's also active, energetic, enthusiastic, but he's much more, in terms of his thinking, he's much more analytical and wants to think more objectively about things. So he might take a bit more time to make a decision, for instance, than you might. So Ben, you might be more impulsive, and Bill might think a bit more. In terms of how you work together. So he might
That's certainly how I've thought of our relationship, as a sort of more of a father figure than a close friend.
Right, okay. And funny enough, in my experience, NTs, by the way, which is what you are, Bill, you're an NT. So the middle letters are your function pairs. So that means you're a big picture thinker. And that makes you more of a debater. So you're the sort of person that likes to debate and, to discuss. And you might even take a contrary view just because it's fun. You might devil's advocate a bit, that sort of, that type.
Debs, when Lucy listens to this is Bill's partner, she's going to have an absolute field day.
I've got to say, I know it's not like me to talk across a couple of other extroverts with my 98th percentile, but I have to say, I feel that is quite an accurate reflection of certainly the input I get, but also where I am in my life now. And, Myers-Briggs is, there are critics of it, and there are more sophisticated, expensive versions out there. But for people like you, Ben, and I, who are sort of middle-tier professionals who are just trying to get a handle on our soft skills, that is a really illuminating experience, Debs.
Yeah, and you're right. It has got its cynics, and there are things. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it is evolving all the time. And I've been using it practically for the last 18 years, and it's really helped me. It really has. And the comparison, in terms of the NT and the NF, of course, the NF is the big picture feeler. So, and that's me too. So, what for us, possibilities are everything. Dreaming, visions, where we can go, what we can do is so important to us. And actually, the feeling side it's not as important as the big picture. However, if someone shatters our dreams or tries to damage those dreams, that's when we get really hurt. So that's the sort of difference. And where you two will meet, you'll meet on those possibilities, but you've got to be a little bit careful about that thinker-feeler thing, because that's where you possibly might have conflict or things. If you understand each other very well, then fine. But if for instance, if Bill gives Ben a little bit of feedback, it's a bit brutal, then, it could happen.
I will after this, I'll tell you. Jeez.
Debs, this is amazing. Like, honestly, this is what, 70, 80 questions, and I would say you've hit me and Bill very, very on the head there.
But you're going to get on so well because you are so similar, and that difference actually could also be very important in terms of how you work together. If you can, and I think you do appreciate each other's difference. So it can be the thing that causes conflict, but it also can be the thing that makes the relationship more interesting.
I'm going to say the first thing after this, I'm going to send it to Lucy, make her do it instead of going to bed. Deb, I know you spend all day on this doing Zooms at the moment. So I really appreciate you doing this, certainly in the evening. So thank you so much. It's been great.
It's been such fun, guys. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll do this again maybe before the end of the year and see if we come up with the same results again.
All right.
All right, guys. Speak to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Guys, bye.